watched a documentary once on hypernovas, that when they were first discovering the gamma bursts in the galaxy, they thought it was aliens having wars with each other. That was one of the ideas that were being bandied about.
It's really great. I mean, people do legitimately look for signatures from alien civilizations. There are papers written about, because you might say, what would the signature of an interstellar starship look like? What would it look like if we saw an interstellar civilization, an interspacefaring civilization? Could we detect the signatures? So there's a bit of work done on that, and we don't see any evidence for anything.
Well, when you see someone like the people that run SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and they're always like asking for funding. They're like, we need more funding. We have to figure this out. And one day, what if we shut down and then the signal comes? Like, that seems to me to be like one of the biggest like Hail Mary wishes, like hoping that you're going to find a radio signal from a galaxy far, far away that has intelligent life in it.
In our galaxy. Well, it's interesting though that if you ask astronomers, so you say, what's the probability of other civilizations being out there? Then they will point, for example, to the new data from the Kepler Space Telescope, which tells us that there are probably around 20 billion Earth-like planets in the Milky Way galaxy, in the sense that they're small rocky planets in what's called the habitable zone around stars.
The Goldilocks.
Around main sequence stars like the Earth, like the Sun. So 20 billion, so maybe 1 in 10 stars in the sky has an Earth-like planet around it, potentially. So that's a lot. So you think 20 billion? Well, surely life must have arisen on some of those. The answer is probably yes, I suspect. We may find life on Mars in the next 10 years, but it'll be microbes. So the question then becomes, well, how likely is it for simple life, if it arises, to make its way into a civilization? And that's where the biologists come and kind of calm the astronomers down and say, well, you might think there are lots of places for life, we would agree. But on Earth, it took 3.8 billion years to go from the origin of life to a civilization, which is about a third of the age of the universe, give or take. So you had to have an unbroken, stable line of life that evolves in the right way. There's a thing called the Cambrian explosion in the history of life on Earth, which was about 550 million years ago or so, which sounds like a long time. But for 3 billion years before that, there was nothing that we would call complex. Single-celled organisms doing some clever stuff like photosynthesis, but not much. And then suddenly you get a big jump in the oxygen content of the atmosphere on Earth, which was to do with photosynthesis and some geology in play with it. That's how the oxygen gets into the atmosphere. And then you get a big jump and you get complex life emerging. And then pretty quickly, 500 million years or so, you go from complex things to a civilization. But even then, you think about Homo sapiens we mentioned earlier, they only arose 200,000 years ago. So for the vast majority of the history of life on Earth, there's been nothing that could do anything clever in the sense of thinking and building spacecraft and radio telescopes. So there's a legitimate debate about whether the undoubted increase in... We know now that there are homes for life out there in the Milky Way. They're very common. We know that. But what we don't know is the probability that life will emerge in the first place, and secondly, the probability that will be turned into a civilization. And I think that's very low. So I think the probability, if I guessed, I would say the probability that life will emerge, given the right conditions, is very high. And what one piece of evidence you could put forward to that is that it did appear to emerge on Earth as soon as it could, after the formation of the Earth and the oceans. So you get life, but then it took a long time on Earth. So you might say, well, the probability of it doing anything intelligent and interesting are quite low, maybe less than 1 in 20 billion. In which case we end up being the only civilization in the Milky Way at the moment. It's possible. You can make that argument. And my experience is academic biologists tend to be on the cautious side, and astronomers tend to be on the optimistic side.
It's all relative, though, isn't it? Because even if we are only one out of this entire Milky Way galaxy, but if you look at the entire universe, then the idea of there being not just a life form like human beings, but the exact same life form is not just once, but an infinite number of times.
In the universe, absolutely.
In the universe.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, there are 350 billion galaxies in the observable universe, so it would be, surely there are civilizations out there.
And more advanced as well, then.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case.
Sure.
And it has to be the case in an infinite universe, as you say. But if we confine ourselves to the Milky Way, which is really the only place we
It's our
ever
hood.
have any hope of exploring or contacting anyone. We'll never contact anyone, even in the Andromeda galaxy. It's 2.2 million light years away.
But
we won't. But the Milky Way, if there's someone there, we could at least aspire to contact them. So it's worth that effort to listen. We don't spend much money on it. We spend too little on it, I think. It would be a tremendous discovery.